Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, from the latest UKV, have the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are going to continue to see high pressure slowly building in throughout the rest of this week. It's not going to turn instantly dry, but we are going to turn slowly and gradually drier. Still a few weather fronts breaking through at times, especially in the north and the west, could give some heavier rain at times, and of course with higher pressure building in, we'll also see clearer skies and the risk of frosts as well. But for the last few days of January and first few days of February, not expecting anything too remarkable at this stage. As we head into the longer range though, interest does continue to build for where this high pressure moves. As we saw in yesterday's video, we did see a quite substantial shift to more of a continental flow within some of the model outputs yesterday, which would produce slightly chillier, frostier, and maybe slightly wintry conditions. And today that move has gone even further, and we're actually seeing some proper easterly winds from some runs and ensemble members as well. Now, it's not overwhelming at this stage, but definitely said quite a big shift, and the GFS midday run today has produced a very cold easterly wind there into early February. GM hinting at it, and the ECMWF also very close to getting some very cold air pushing in, and as I said, quite a big downward shift in the ensembles today. So perhaps could another easterly wind be building within the model output? We've seen this numerous times throughout January, and we'd get pretty much the stage we are today, and then it would diminish within the model output. Could this be the time that easterly actually does occur? Well, I'll explore that in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, be sure to like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see we have got some slightly high pressure building in at the moment, and that's why for most it is fairly dry. But the high pressure is sandwiched between two areas of lower pressure. We've got this big storm system down towards the Bay of Biscay. This has actually been named by some of the Met services further southwards. I think it was by the Spanish Met Office, bringing significant impacts around the Bay of Biscay. You can see the northern edge of the weather front just skimming the far southeast, and here we got some persistent heavy rain during this evening. But you head slightly further inland, just a bit of thicker cloud, for it does turn clearer skies across much of the Midlands. Further northwards and westwards, we start to see a bit of a westerly flow trying to push in with some colder polar maritime air, so a few snow showers, and generally a more showery feel. And in this gap, it's high pressure, clear skies, cold air, and you can see frost is developing in these areas. Of course, the further northwards and westwards you go into those clearer skies, into those colder air masses, that is where you'll more likely see a frost. Further south and east was a bit more cloud building in, still chilly perhaps across the East Anglia and the Midlands and parts of Wales and southwest England, but especially for central, southern and southeastern areas with that thicker cloud, it will hold those temperatures up tonight. Now, we do have some Met Office warnings issued. We've got ice warnings issued. You can see it's a standard warning, and it does cover northern Scotland and northern parts of Northern Ireland, and it is for generally a few wintry showers, a bit of snow, and just generally ice after those showers falling potentially onto frozen ground. So nothing too significant, but the risk is there over the coming hours until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Now, if you look at the latest UKV now, you can see that storm system clearing the far southeast and showers pushing in from the north and west overnight tonight, but in between, clearer skies, frosts develop. Into Thursday, we all are under higher pressure, and it's widely dry during Thursday afternoon. Lots of sunshine, be quite a stunning day if we're being completely honest. Into Friday though, or Thursday evening into Friday, we do see a weather front pushing in. As I said, high pressure is building in, but we are going to see some of these weather fronts making an approach, and you can see a bit of snow, especially on the leading edge over higher ground from this system, and it does slowly move south and eastwards, losing its intensity as it does, still delivering a few hours of rain before eventually it does fizzle away. The last day of January, once that precipitation clears from the southeast in the morning, it's quite a beautiful day. Yes, a bit more in the way of cloud around than we saw during Thursday afternoon, but still plenty of dry conditions, the sun poking through, and a really nice winter's day there to end January. However, As we progress into the Thursday of February, we do see another weather front trying to approach. Just gives some thicker cloud further eastwards, but rain starts to break out on Saturday. It does slowly push eastwards. Again, though, diminishing as it does as it runs into the higher pressure. And eventually, we see another weather front trying to push in. But you can see it does really stall further westwards, and that is because, as I said, higher pressure is just sat to our south and our east. It will take a bit of time for it to fully build in, but we are fully expecting it to build in there into early February. These lows continue to try and fight against it, but majority of runs do have that high pressure firmly building in. Yes, low pressure weather front still could flow with the far northwest, but generally speaking, it should be fine and dry the further south and eastwards you go. And as I said, as we progress further into February, that high pressure could push further northwards and eastwards, and that's where we could develop more of an easterly wind. Do look at the upper temperatures, we see lots of chopping and changing over the coming days. Pretty cold as we do head through the rest of this working week. And then into the weekend, we start to see a milder air mass pushing in there. And then we start to see some chillier air mass return and kind of oscillating between air masses as we do see these weather fronts getting thrown our way. As I said, though, high pressure really degrading those weather fronts away. So that's why we are going to see lots of chopping and changing with the air masses, but hopefully not too much in the way of precipitation, especially further eastwards. Now, do look at the max temperatures. You can see overnight tonight frost developing in those northern and western areas, even into the far southeast, potentially a frost once all that rain and cloud does clear. It's not a massive frost, not down to -5 to -10 like we've seen it during some days of January, but -2 to maybe -5 in the worst affected areas. Thursday's a pretty chilly day. It's a pretty crisp winter's day, widely 3 to 7 degrees, maybe slightly colder across Scotland. Another frost develops, but it does get degrading away with a bit of cloud building in there into Friday morning, and then another crisp day there for Friday, the last day of January. Again, looking at kind of 3 to 8 degrees for most. Into the first day of February, a bit of a frost to wake up in some areas, but generally temperatures will rise during the afternoon. Yes, still chilly, only 4 to 7 degrees, but eventually the mild air will slowly push in, especially in those western portions. And then into Sunday, again looking at mid to high single digits. And then into Monday, again similar temperatures. So slightly milder through the weekend, but still nothing too spectacular. For, as I said, longer range, especially into early February, could turn much, much colder. And if we do look at those potential cold conditions on the latest GFS now, you can see that storm system clearing to our south. Brief ridge of high pressure builds in over the next 24 hours. And then we see this very small weather front, this little drop there in the pressure, in the flow. That's where we see that weak weather front pushing through. So you can see generally higher pressure is building in, but we're just seeing this slight little distortion. And that is allowing that rain to move through. But generally, high pressure starts to dominate there into early February. Still coming up against those lows from the Atlantic. Still could produce a bit of rain in the west. But generally speaking, higher pressure is starting to dominate. And then it's as we develop further into February, we see this build of pressure, a substantial build of pressure towards Scandinavia and up towards Russia. And we do start to see a pretty far-fetched easterly wind develop there. Now, it is getting towards that day 8, day 10 range. So it is fairly longer range, but we are seeing increased confidence from it within the runs today. And it does pull in quite a substantial easterly wind there for a time. The pressure lowers, so there would be showers, maybe not significant showers, but definitely snow showers, definitely some winteriness. And if weather fronts bump in off the Atlantic like this shows, there could be further substantial snow in this sort of scenario. Again, we'll reiterate, there is no beast from the east. If we look at the upper air temperatures, there is quite a lot of cold air to our east, and we do push the -10 isotherm in, but when we saw the beast from the east, we got down close to -20 degrees at 850 HP. It was a big block of very cold air, so not seeing that here, but nonetheless, still very interesting indeed. Slowly, as we progress beyond that, though, as I said, the weather fronts try to push in up against that block. We could see, as I said, a bit of snow before eventually the westerly winds start to break through further and push it all away. But we do see a pretty cold easterly wind there for a good 4 or 5 days. And as I said, there would be the risk of some snow in places. As you can see that here from this latest GFS run. Again, it's one to keep a very close eye on. It is all dependent on the positioning of this high and how quickly it pushes that easterly flow in. but could be coming in as soon as kind of 8 or 9 days' time. One to keep a very close eye on, all dependent on the positioning of this high pressure, low pressure to our north. If we do check out the latest GEM, broadly very similar over the coming days. Higher pressure slowly building in and then dominating into early February. Still a few little breakthroughs of lower pressure there. And again, that high trying to build towards Scandinavia and up towards Russia. And it does have a go at building an easterly in, but never gets the orientation. Still got that pressure, but not getting the orientation, and it means all of that cold air sits in Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, not spreading our way. So you can see we get very close, but don't pull it off, and that is because that pressure doesn't sustain itself towards Scandinavia. The low pressure, the Atlantic flow is slightly too strong, and it pushes it away. This is definitely a very plausible scenario, and this is what we've seen from easterlies that have tried to develop during January, sort of a couple of weeks ago. So I wouldn't be surprised if this happened again, but very good examples here of the two different scenarios we can see. Even though there's very subtle differences, it does create a massive surface difference in terms of those temperatures and precipitation. And if you do finish by looking at the latest ECM, though, if this has just come out, you can see again higher pressure building in over the coming days, and then eventually starting to build properly towards Scandinavia there into the first full week of February, and we do start to push an easterly wind our way. Not as clear-cut as the GFS because that pressure rises slightly further eastwards and southwards, but still nudging a colder easterly flow. And you can see those isobars coming in with that colder air. Again, not as cold as the GFS, but definitely would be frosty, foggy, maybe not snow in this case. Again, the air mass isn't quite as cold. It's not as distinct an easterly wind. But nonetheless, very interesting to see. Very similar to the GFS, GM. And yeah, all three runs nudging towards at least an easterly flow, and the GFS properly building an easterly wind there as we do progress into early February. And as I said, there's been quite a shift in the ensembles as well. Over the next week, hovering below and above average into the early part of February. So with dry conditions around, temperatures probably will be around average with frost overnight. But yet around the 5th, 6th, 7th of February, in around 7, 8, 9 days' time, and look at this, substantial runs now going cold. Not at all, but enough to shift the ensemble mean below average by a couple of degrees. And there's quite a few, including the operational run there, getting close to -10 or below -10. Not enough to say it's the favoured scenario, but definitely enough to put a massive amount of uncertainty there within the ensembles. We had a lot more certainty that it was going to be more around average or above average a day or two ago. Been quite a big flip here as we do progress into that first full week or second week of February. But yeah, lots of runs -5 and below. You see the 2 metre temperatures dropping as well, low single digits, so definitely a colder trend. A bit of snow in some of these runs, again, just to illustrate the environment we'd see. And the biggest thing is the dew points. You can see dew points are actually relatively low over the coming days. Again, risk of frosts around. But you can see, again, quite a cluster there, well below average, around that kind of 6th, 7th to 11th, 12th of February. Now, the latest ECM hasn't fully come out yet, the midday run, but if we look at the midnight run, you can also see quite a substantial shift. If we go back to the midday run yesterday, you see there was a few that were colder, but generally most were average to above average in the longer range. We go to the midnight run today, look at that longer range, a substantial shift colder, not again overwhelming, but definitely a large shift, similar to the GFS. The operational ECM, though, if there is pretty cold as well, and there's probably a good 10 to maybe 15 runs down close to -8, -10, which is kind of the level for snow and very cold days. So yeah, quite a big shift there in the longer term from both the GFS and the ECMWF. All three of the main operational runs are now showing a bit of an easterly flow. The GFS, the one that's most on board with a proper full-blown easterly. So very interesting, the shifts we're seeing today. We're still not quite there to say it's the favoured scenario. But what we're looking at today is a substantial shift. One, that if this gets going and starts to build a bit of momentum within the model output, we could be in store for a very interesting first 10 or 15 days of February. Looks fairly mundane the first few days with high pressure, around average temperatures, but beyond that, certainly could get very interesting if an easterly flow did develop. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. A very quiet next few days coming up in terms of weather conditions, which is definitely a good thing after the pretty disruptive January we've had so far. But yeah, we'll wait and see what happens in the long term. Of course, we'll keep you updated. So as I say, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.